Now this next problem we're going to work now, this deals with really financial leverage, and it's going to show you how to do an EBIT earnings per share analysis. Now there's a couple of things about EBIT earnings per share I want you to know. One is that the EBIT earnings per share analysis, what you're trying to get to is what's the proper capital structure for the firm? How much debt should we use? How much equity should we use? The other thing I want you to understand is that the goal of an EBIT earnings per share analysis is to find the capital structure that will maximize earnings per share. Now, that's what EBIT earnings per share analysis does. The problem is that as a financial manager, our normative objective function is not to maximize earnings per share, but to maximize the price of the stock in the market. Now, here's where it gets a little murky in theory. Whatever we came up with, let's say it said to use 70% debt to maximize earnings per share. As a financial manager, when you find that answer now, you need to understand that what you should do is use less amount than that. Use less debt than 70%. Use 60% or whatever it is. There's no magic formula to tell you what that lower number should be. But studies do show, though, that the price of the stock in the market is going to reach its peak before you maximize earnings per share. So whatever number you get when you do an EBIT earnings per share analysis, you should always step back. You should use less debt than that, because our goal, again, is not to maximize earnings per share, it's to maximize the price of the stock in the market. So the market's looking at you adding debt financing and thinking, the benefits of the debt financing is less than what they're adding to the value of the firm, and the price starts to go down at some point as you add more debt. So again, whatever number you get now, when you do one of these things, you should use less debt, because our goal, again, is to maximize the price of the stock in the market. Now, this is a problem that reads like this. It says, DataCheck is considering two capital structures. The key information is shown in the following table. Assume a 40% tax rate, and they give us capital structure A and capital structure B. And in this problem, it's fairly simple. They use a long-term debt and common stock. And as you look at this now, you should see that capital structure B is the one that uses the most debt. That's the proposal that has the most debt in it. That is $200,000 in debt instead of $100,000, which is what structure A would call. It says calculate two EBIT earnings per share coordinates. Plot the two capital structures on a set of EBIT earnings per share axes. Indicate what EBIT range, if any, each structure is preferred. Discuss the leverage and risk aspects of each structure. And in the C part, it says if you expect the EBIT to be $75,000, which capital structure would you use? Now, the first two parts of this problem, I'm never going to ask you to do that on a test. And the solutions that I gave you for this problem, you'll see how it is you come up with these things. So if you really wanted to graph this out, that would be the way to do it. Now, I'm going to tell you now, I teach EBIT earnings per share analysis different than the book does and most textbooks do. We get the same answer, all that, but again, I don't want you to get graph paper and things like that. I just think this is a little bit better way to look at it. Now, what I'm going to do initially here is I'm going to show you the end of the problem. This is where we're going to. You need to understand where we're going so that when we do all the pieces in the middle, it kind of makes sense. Now, this is a graph for an earnings per share EBIT analysis. Now, you'll see that EBIT is on the horizontal axis, earnings per share is on the vertical axis. And we have two capital structures. We have A and B. And as we talked about just a moment ago, B has more debt. Now, the slope of these lines here, these straight lines that you see here for A and B, That's really the degree of financial leverage. And so it would make sense to you, I would hope, that since capital structure B has more debt, its degree of financial leverage would be greater, and you see that the slope of its line is greater. Okay? A has less debt, would have a lower degree of financial leverage. The slope of its line is lower. And what happens because of that is that these lines intersect. And this is indeed what your author refers to as the indifference point. Now, when they talk about the indifference point, they're really talking about EBIT. That is, what is the level of EBIT that the company would have to achieve so that the earnings per share under capital structure A would equal the earnings per share under capital structure B. That's what's called the indifference point. And these are indeed the answers that we're going to get when we do this problem now. And what you see here, this 16,000 and this 34,000 now, that's the financial break-even point for capital structure A and the financial break-even point for capital structure B. And in just a moment now, in the next video, we're going to show you how you calculate the financial break-even point. And in another video, we're going to show you how to calculate the indifference point. Now, this is sort of the end of the problem here. And what you want to do as a student is that you always want to be on the dominant line. That is, the one that's higher. In other words, at this level of EBIT, this line dominates all those lines. So that's capital structure A, and if you expect EBIT to be in that range, you'd want capital structure A. On the other hand, at some point, B becomes the dominant line. And that point where that happens now is the indifference point. So if you expect EBIT to be less than the indifference point, less than 52,000, then you would go with the capital structure that has less debt, capital structure A. If you expect EBIT to be greater than the indifference point, you'd want to go with more financial leverage. That is, you want to go with capital structure B. And in this problem, they tell us that we expect EBIT to be $75,000. So as we look at these results here, if they expect EBIT to be $75,000, you'd want to go with the greater leverage. That is, you'd want to go with capital structure B. So that's sort of the end of the problem here. I'm showing you that because I want you to understand kind of why we're doing these calculations and where we're going to and what we're trying to get to at some point. And so we want to be on the capital structure. That is, we want the mix of capital that's always going to maximize earnings per share. That's the goal of the EBIT earnings per share analysis, and that's what we're going to learn how to do with this problem.